Ole Miss running back portal recruiting is starting to get in focus. Well, I think it is.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about how running back recruiting may get turned on its head with the Croskey-Merritt commitment. Does that affect Henry Parrish? And what do the big guy backs visits look like this week? Also, we talk about Chris Beard bringing in an absolute dude in Sean Pedulla after missing out on Elijah Martin, who's going to Florida. And we talk about Mike Bianco doing two things this weekend that surprised no one. He wins his 1,000th game, and he drops a must-win series against the Georgia Bulldogs. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you very much for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. You know, there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss sports moving forward. Go to thegrovecollective.com and join the day today for as little as like $20 a month. Also, shout out to Kevin Wayne for calling the Croskey-Merritt transfer in January. It's always fun when our everydayers participate, get it right, and get recognized. Thank you very much, Kevin, for listening. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right team, right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Really interesting stuff. On Friday, Jakoricrosy Merritt committed to Ole Miss. This is a running back, 189 carries, 1,190 yards, 17 touchdowns. Actually performed very well. He's listed at 5'11", 205 pounds. So he's a decent sized running back. He's producing at a very high level. I am impressed with this pickup. Now, what you need to know about this pickup, and while Ole Miss doesn't foresee anything wrong going on, him leaving Arizona and going to Ole Miss, you got natural sour grapes from that side of their perspective. The thing they were talking about was about Jakoricrosy Merritt's eligibility. Ole Miss thinks that it's not going to be a problem once he graduates from New Mexico next month, but it was something that was brought up by the Arizona beat writers and the group of people there. This is a good running back that Ole Miss picked up, though. This is a guy that had decent games against bowl teams. He got 200 yards against Fresno State. He had 200 yards against Utah State. He ran for over 100 yards against Wyoming. Wyoming's a good little ball club as well. And then he went over 150 with Tennessee Chattanooga. He transferred to New Mexico from Alabama State, I believe, either Alabama State or Alabama A&M. But he is a guy that is produced at this level. Now, this is a one-and-done running back. We mentioned that Ole Miss is recruiting players that is not going to affect a Kylan Deere. It's not. And this is a player that he is going to be a one-and-done player if he makes it into Oxford. We talked about Ole Miss needing a Henry Parrish type player. This would be a Henry Parrish type player, which leads to an interesting question. We're all assuming that Henry Parrish is going to end up at Ole Miss. There's been crystal balls put in on Henry Parrish. There has been all sorts of prognostications on Twitter about Henry Parrish Jr. Henry Parrish, 100 carries, 625 yards, 6 touchdowns. Even by my Simpson County, Mississippi math, that's 6.25 yards per carry. He was the leading rusher with the Miami Hurricanes. He was Mr. Do-It-All. He would be a Henry Parrish type running back if Ole Miss brought him in. The question becomes, and what we need to talk about essentially, is whether or not Henry Parrish Jr. has become redundant in this transfer portal window cycle. I'm not saying he has. I'm not saying he hasn't. I'm saying that we just have something that we need to talk about in that situation. Henry Parrish Jr. is a good running back. He is built about the same as Jakoricrosy Merritt. He is all of that stuff that Merritt can do, Parrish can do as well. So the question naturally becomes if it has been done redundant. Now, I've heard different rumors about NIL. I've heard all of that stuff going on, but I can't verify it one way or another. All I know that it was with Ole Miss getting Jakoricrosy Merritt, that may have changed the paradigm a little bit in the running back room. It's not so much Henry Parrish Jr. very centric at the moment. I was told that Henry Parrish Jr. was going to commit over this weekend. And he still could. By the time after I record this, he could still record because I'm recording at about 4 o'clock on Sunday, just so everybody knows. But I was told that if he was going to make a decision, it was going to be during this weekend, and that didn't happen. So something is going on, whether it be a paradigm shift, whether it be NIL related, whether it be somebody else coming on for this running back, I do not know. All I know is that Henry Parrish Jr. has not committed to Ole Miss a weekend, and Jakoricrosy Merritt has. And that is something that we have to really dig into a little bit as well. Now, another thing going on is Trent Howland, the running back out of Indiana, is going to be on a visit today at Ole Miss. Now, the question becomes, has Trent Howland become the secondary running back that comes with Jakoricrosy Merritt? If those are the two main ones. Like I said, other stuff can happen. This stuff can change in a heartbeat, but it's starting to look like Trent Howland is that guy that is going to be the secondary running back for Lane Kiffin if he decides to come to Ole Miss. Now, he's an underclassman, but he is somebody that is 6'3", 240 pounds. He is a big guy. He is a thumper. We have talked about Ole Miss needing to fill roles, not holes on this offense, and this is a role that we know that Ole Miss is looking for. He is 6'3", 240. If everybody remembers what Brandon Jacobs was when he was at Auburn or with the New York Giants, that is the size back that we're dealing with. And there's another back as well that we are at least paying attention to, and that is Peny Boone, who is from Louisville by way of Toledo. He had 194 carries, 1,400 yards. Now, it came out on Twitter just, I think, Saturday night that a return to Louisville is in the cards. And the way that that breakup went down, not only does that surprise me, that kind of tells me something. That tells me something about the way this unfolded for this player, one way or another. I think Trent Howland has a chance to be the secondary running back that Ole Miss gets in this transfer portal window. And then whether Ole Miss takes 2 or 3 depends on whether or not Henry Parrish Jr. shows up on campus as well. It's really interesting. It's cool. I love the fact that all of these dominoes are finally starting to fall to where we can see things get into focus a little bit. Now, a lot can change and a lot can change really quickly. Not saying it can't. But with Jakoricrosy Merritt and Trent Howland, you have a chance to have a nice little set of running backs that can fill your running back room with roles that can help you go far in the playoffs. Somebody like Trent Howland could be helpful in a 4-minute offense type situation. Ole Miss has a problem whenever they have to go slow. One of the problems that they have is because they go so quickly, it's a relatively simple offense. There's not a lot of motion. It's pretty easy to diagnose. So when you slow it down to where the speed doesn't play as a deterrent to defensive players, all of a sudden the offense becomes a little bit easier to diagnose. It becomes a little bit more difficult to deal with. And Ole Miss going in and having a 6'3", 240-pound Trent Howland in these 4-minute situations means that it might not matter because Ole Miss has gotten the size that they wanted to get on the offensive line. We talked about Nate Kalepo. We've talked about Diego Pounds. We've talked about even Caleb Warren and Bryson Sanders and Jeremy James and all of those guys up front and what they can be. Well, part of that is so that if they need to slow it down in this playoff run type of year, they can do that. They're not so dependent on the tempo as they have been in the past. So we'll see how this goes. Now, I tell people all the time, somebody always says, I always bet on myself. I always bet on myself. Well, when you bet on yourself, sometimes you lose. There is a chance that a scouting mistake could happen, a strategic mistake could happen. All of that. Looking at it from the outside and looking in, I feel pretty decent about where this Ole Miss offense could be as far as roles on the team. You could potentially have your thumper if Trent Howland decides to come on board. He's visiting today, like I said. You've got Jakoricrosy-Merritt, who is a big-time touchdown getter running back. You've got Ulysses Bentley, who is a plus Jerry and Ely. And you've got Jakoricrosy, who has all of the potential in the world to be a good back. We just need to see it. It could be a situation that whoever Ole Miss takes in the spring window, Jakoricrosy is good enough to where it makes all of that moot. Remember 2022, whenever Quinshon Judkins blew up on the scene and Zach Evans, got less and less carries. And by the end of the year, you're like, well, Quinshon Judkins is the best running back on this team. Well, that has the potential to happen if Risano does the same thing. If he grows over the course of the season, he has a chance to do that. And because of Ole Miss playing 4D chess at the moment, we'll call it, and the running backs they're bringing, the roles that they're bringing in, this offense has a chance to be very, very explosive. Period. And when you look at the fact that at some point during this football season, Logan Diggs is going to be healthy, by the time a playoff run happens, it'll be nice to have him there and available if you need to do that as well. There's talent on this Ole Miss football team. There's no way to get around that. And it all starts with the aggressiveness that they're going to attack this transfer portal with and the dominoes that are going to start falling right now. It's pretty interesting type stuff. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. Has Ole Miss zeroed in on their own version of Dalton Connect? Maybe. When hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn just isn't a job board. It helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those that aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be perfect for the role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and you might not have the time or the resources to hire. It's no different than hiring a college football coach. If you hire the right one, in a couple of years, you will be in the discussion for the playoff and everything feels like it would be going right. If you hire the wrong one, you're going to be doing this again in 3 years. And in the real world, if you hire the wrong one, you might be doing this again in 3 weeks. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is now available. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Chris Beard has been going. Last week was pretty fantastic for Chris Beard, and it continues to get that way. Ole Miss, over the course of the weekend, took in a couple of visitors. I think Elijah Martin, the Florida Atlantic guard, ended up visiting Ole Miss. He ended up at Florida. He committed to the Gators, and okay, that's fine. This is a Mississippi kid that ended up committing to Florida. But another player got brought in. And this is, I think, from Zach Berry from On3, the Ole Miss Spirit. Virginia Tech guard Sean Pedulla will be at Ole Miss today. The Rebels are looking to revamp the roster for year 2 in the Chris Beard era. Ole Miss Spirit has more here, and there's the link there. So, good player visiting Ole Miss. Now, if you want to learn about Sean Pedulla, he averaged 16.4. He averaged 4.3 rebounds, 4.6 assists. That's kind of a big deal of somebody that is going to distribute the basketball to other players. Pedulla also performed well against quad 1 level opposition in the ACC at Virginia Tech, and he absolutely showed out. Now, if we want to talk about it, let's look at the game log over the course of the season. Virginia Tech ended up going a couple of rounds into the NIT. That's not necessarily important. In the NIT against Ohio State, he scored 18. In the NIT against Richmond, he scored 17. Against Florida State in the ACC tournament, a loss, he scored 24. Against Notre Dame, he scored 28. He scored 26 against Pitt, 21 against Miami. And he had a run of 33 points against also Miami, 32 against Clemson, and 26 against FSU. You look at earlier in the season, he scored 26 against South Carolina. That's relevant of what's going on. But he was pretty consistently, when he wasn't doing that, in the mid-level teens of chance to show up in a system, be a glue guy, and kind of help your offense really go. When you look at the 4 players that Ole Miss brought in previously, Malik Dia, Michael Brown-Jones, Davin Smith, those guys, you would constantly look, the scoring is between 15 and 19 points. These are good basketball players. Now, the assist numbers aren't there, but the rebound numbers are there. Because whoever is on this Ole Miss basketball team for the 2024-2025 season, they're going to rebound the basketball, and they are going to play defense. That is being recruited for, but scoring the basketball absolutely needs to happen as well. Now, I mentioned, is this a Dalton Connect type basketball player? If you look at the numbers of what he put up against really good teams over the course of the season, I don't know if you can discount the fact that he would make that jump if he got a change of location and got featured in an offense. Sean Pedulla is a good little guard player. He is also somebody that has a little bit of size to him. He can play the game. He does that positionless thing fairly well. But this guard shooting the basketball. Now, there's some days when you look at his game logs, he's like 1 for 6 from 3, 1 for 8 from 3. We all lived through Marshall Henderson. We know what volume shooting looks like from time to time. But when it goes, he can score points in bunches. And the trick for Ole Miss in this whole situation will be Ole Miss cannot rely too heavily on this player. And if you look at Malik Dia and Michael Brown-Jones coming in as the big men, because both of them are about 6'9"-ish, and Moussa Cisse hit the portal, Jamarian Sharp, he is out of eligibility. Whenever you look at what this basketball team could be, it's kind of interesting to me to see what can happen, especially with the shooters that are being brought in, and especially with the defense and rebounds that is being brought in. I think this basketball team has a chance to look completely different than it did a year ago. And I don't mean that necessarily in a weird way. I think that Chris Beard is just going to make this basketball team his own a little bit. Now, we saw videos. I think Jamin Brakefield put something out. He mentioned that he was not playing his last night on senior day. I think Brakefield is coming back, and he can be a true stretch 4 if you have other big men that can be a true 4. I think Jamin Brakefield at that point becomes a weapon. You have Juju Murray who's an excellent shooter of the basketball, but he can't be a primary. So all of these other offensive weapons that Ole Miss are bringing in, I think that is interesting about basically all of this happening. You hear me talk about being fired up all the time. I like the way that this offense and this team is being built for 2024 and 2025. The basketball team has a chance to make a jump in year two, even though there's not going to be a lot of continuity between year one and year two. It's going to be essentially a completely different basketball team. But Chris Beard being in that seat, okay, this is the one difference. The players are going to change, all of that stuff. I get that. But Chris Beard, not in the beginning, not drinking from the fire hose, gives him a chance to come at this a little bit more analytically. He can find exactly his guys. It's not so much a rush to fill a roster like it was a year ago. And sometimes, you have all these good players that are coming in. You didn't know how it was going to fit and if it was going to fall apart. Well, it ended up falling apart at the end. This year's team, there's going to be a little bit more of a basis for knowledge of the players coming from the portal, and they have a chance to be pretty good. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. Mike did two things this weekend that will surprise no one. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Right now, Ole Miss, just a yes bet for the playoff. Ole Miss, you can get minus 122. That's about a 54% percentage of success of the probability that it will happen. Not that that's an extravagant thing or anything like that. I just found it pretty interesting. But they have all this type stuff that you can bet on. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On College Sports Today, or Locked On Sports Today, is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. Be part of history. So Ole Miss dropped a series against the Georgia Bulldogs this weekend, and two things happened in the series that is going to surprise no one who's followed Ole Miss baseball this season. First of all, the Georgia Bulldogs won the series. Now, Ole Miss did not get swept. Ole Miss got beat 2 out of 3 games, but they did not get swept. But Ole Miss losing the series was important. This was a series that Ole Miss needed to. Ole Miss needed to win the series this time. And honestly, just my opinion, Ole Miss's decision to pitch to Charlie Condon is almost malpractice. The best hitter in all of college baseball, hitting bombs all over the place, to where if you just didn't pitch to him, if you just gave him the Barry Bonds treatment and put him on base, you probably win 2 this weekend. It's a weird situation, but that's kind of where we are. The other thing that happened over the course of this weekend is Mike Bianco won his 1,000th baseball game and his 900th at Ole Miss. 2 milestones, 1 game. Ole Miss won that, and everybody that has followed Ole Miss baseball for the course of the last 20 years, that surprises no one. Congratulations to Mike Bianco. And anybody that wants to discount that achievement, their agenda is showing, their bias is showing. That is a congratulatory method for Mike Bianco. Now, you need to be able to separate his career for what is going on in the micro right now in this season. And I did a short when was that? Probably Saturday, that said that Ole Miss Baseball is kind of the opposite of the mob. And I said that every time I think I'm back in with Ole Miss Baseball, they kick me back out. And this is just not a year for Ole Miss Baseball. I think this baseball team is better than it was a year ago, okay? Understand that. I think it is better than it was a year ago. It's not where it needs to be. There are holes on the roster. Ole Miss is having problems at shortstop. Think about that. Defensive shortstop play is something that has not been a problem for Ole Miss in the better part of the last 20 years. Ole Miss is having a problem with pass balls at catcher. Catcher is not a position that you have had to worry about on a Mike Bianco team in 20 years. This is just not Ole Miss's year. Now, I will say this, and this is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree if you want to. Mike Bianco is going nowhere. Mike Bianco has earned the right to be here for as long as he wants to be here. Sure, there are going to be certain people that are upset about what's going on. There are going to be certain people that are demanding a change or something like that. I get that. I understand that. Mike Bianco did something at Ole Miss, and that is win a national championship in one of the big three sports. That will not be overlooked. Eventually, Mike Bianco Stadium at Swayze Field will be a thing. So this bridge cannot be burned, and that means you cannot fire Mike Bianco. Now, it's a situation to where I think Mike Bianco would Andy Kennedy if it became untenable to a point where he would not be able to get it back to where he needed it to be. But this baseball team, after COVID, has been in a steady rate of decline. The 2022 team was only really good because of the COVID scholarships. You got extra years with Kevin Graham and Justin Bench and Tim Elko and those guys leading to the national title. Other than that, if those players were taken off of that roster, that would be a completely different looking team as well. So the recruiting for Ole Miss Baseball has gone down pretty consistently. I guess the last time it was really clicking would have been that class that had like Jacob Gonzalez and those guys. So we'll see exactly how Mike Bianco tries to fix this, because Mike Bianco deserves the right to fix this. He's earned the right to fix this. Whenever you are winners of 1,000 career games in college baseball, I mean, he might be second or third, somewhere in there, in career SEC wins. Whenever that happens, you have to kind of trust that person to get the right to fix this, especially when this is the first time this ever seemed broken. I expect Mike Bianco is going, like I said, that stadium is going to be named after him, and I expect he's going to work to fix it, or if he doesn't want to do a rebuild, he will simply retire. But one thing I do not think is going to ever happen would be Mike Bianco getting fired and it leaving on bad terms because of those 1,000 career wins, 900 at Ole Miss, a national title in the Big Three. That is kind of the bottom line. So we'll see exactly what happens. Like I said, I think Mike Bianco deserves the right to get the right to fix this first. Just my opinion. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and this is one of the many reasons that we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast, and thank you for that. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.